Well, good evening. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, 100 Black Men of Prince George's County, for a very meaningful conversation around mental health. We recognize that, particularly over the last few months, mental health, particularly in the African American community, has been in the spotlight a great deal. And as leaders in the community, we want to make sure we are giving due attention to it. This is our third time hosting this kind of a town hall because we really want to make sure we are empowering our community. Your mental wellness is as important as your physical wellness. And so we really want to make sure we bring experts to have meaningful conversations that you can benefit from and make sure we resource you after this conversation. So I'm really here just to kick it off. I am Marquez Ball, honored to serve as the Vice President of Operations for the 100 Black Men of Prince George's County. The 100 Black Men of America, our larger organization, was founded in 1963 to empower African American minority communities, invest in youth development, and help us to dispel negative images of African American men. Our Prince George's County chapter was founded in 2012. We provide community empowerment programs based on our four guiding pillars, which are education, health and wellness, economic empowerment, and leadership. We really do strive to do just that. I don't want to be before you all long. I want to say this throughout this conversation, you may have questions. So I encourage you, whether you're watching on YouTube or on Facebook, to make sure you put your questions in the comment and we'll be able to see them and bring them before our panel of subject matter experts. So please do that. Also, I encourage you to click share. Click share right now because you have no idea who within your sphere of influence may drastically benefit from this. This is the conversation that they need to hear. It's an open conversation. All they're doing is watching. No one has to know. And for someone, y'all, this is very, very important. So please help a brother, help a sister by simply clicking share to help your audience, your spheres of influence, your friends, your followers benefit from this type of conversation. With that said, I'm going to hand it over to my brother in the 100 Black Men of Prince George's County, who will be one of the moderators this evening, and that is Dr. Darren Gibson. Dr. Gibson is an organizational development practitioner and social impact strategist. He has been working in the corporate and education sectors for over 20 years. He is a fellow at the Center for Social Impact Strategy at the University of Pennsylvania. He has a passion for the betterment of the marginalized communities and a love for diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. He leverages his many years of public service, volunteerism, and corporate expertise to bring positive change to his local community. He has served in various community leadership positions and currently sits on the board of directors for three not-for-profit organizations that are striving to make positive community impact. Academically, he holds a BA from Winthrop University in South Carolina. He has an MBA from Strayer, a master's degree in law and public policy from Regent School of Law, a master's in nonprofit leadership from University of Pennsylvania School of Social Policy, and a doctorate in organizational leadership and development from Al Grassi University. I hope I said that university right. Nevertheless, he comes with a lot of letters behind his name. Currently, Dr. Gibson is a director of the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship and the chair of the business department at Prince George's County Community College. He has been an adjunct faculty professor at Northern Virginia Community College for 12 years and Trinity Washington University for 7 years, as well as the University of Arizona's global campus for 3 years. That being said, please receive one of our moderators, my friend, my brother, Dr. Darren Gibson.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for this opportunity to be able to come before you today. Thank you, Dr. Ball, for that introduction. I am truly humbled to be here in front of you this evening. So, as Dr. Ball said, my name is Dr. Darren T. Gibson, and I am all things social policy and social impact. I am currently a fellow at the University of Pennsylvania Center for Social Impact Strategies, and in that fellowship, what I do is I study large level federal policies and how those policies affect individuals at the state, the county, the local, and even community levels. So when it comes to how we see large level policies and how they affect you and I'm your guy for that. So we look at all of the data when something has been implemented on a federal level and how it affects those in various communities around the US. So outside of that, in my day job, I am the chair of business as well as the director for the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Prince George's Community College. But my passion is truly social impact. I'm all about social impact spaces and what that looks like for the everyday person. So whether it be looking at opportunities to clear food insecurities, whether it's looking at initiatives to work on mental health practices and improve those things in certain areas, whether it's looking at health disparities across various different gambits of communities. That's where my passion lies. And so that's where I try to focus a lot of my additional time outside of my day job. So I am truly appreciative for this opportunity to come in front of you guys today, as well as I'm extremely excited to be able to help assist in moderating and just this discussion on mental health in our state of where we are in society today. So to help do that, I am going to bring on my co-moderator, my 100 brother, Dr. Troy Waller. Dr. Waller is a member of the 100 Black Men of Prince George's County. He also serves as the co-chair for the 100 Wellness and Health Committee. Dr. Waller graduated with a bachelor's degree in psychology from Southern University. He earned a master's degree in forensic psychology from Marymount University in Virginia, and he earned a doctorate degree in counseling psychology from Argosy University's College of Counseling, Psychology, and Behavioral Sciences. Dr. Waller is the president and chief therapist at Waller Psychotherapy in Washington, D.C., and he has served as an adjunct professor at the Trinity Washington University in DC, as well as the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. Dr. Waller is a licensed professional counselor, and my 100 brother, Dr. Troy Waller. Say hello to the people.
Hello, everybody. It is a pleasure to be here, and I am very excited about this wonderful panel that we have. Thanks for introducing me, Dr. Gibson. You can go on and introduce the panel.
Fantastic. Thank you, brother. It's good to see you as always. I am looking forward to an amazing conversation. So next, I want to introduce you to one of my good friends and neighbors, Dr. Stacy Ball. Dr. Ball is a tenured professor in psychology at the Trinity Washington University in DC. We know each other in two different facets because not only is she my neighbor, but we also served as faculty together during my time in my tenure at Trinity. I was in the School of Business and she was over in the area of behavioral health. So she's a tenured professor at the Trinity Washington University, as well as she was a school psychologist in Baltimore City schools for a number of years. Dr. Ball earned a bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Maryland's Baltimore County campus, and she earned a doctorate in clinical psychology from the Virginia Medical Consortium. Dr. Ball, not only outside of her tenured professor work, she worked for a number of years as a licensed clinical psychologist. So I want everybody to give a big welcome to Dr. Stacy Ball.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
All right. Listen, these guys and their backgrounds are just absolutely amazing. I'm excited for this conversation. My next panelist is Dr. Atasha Christian. Dr. Christian has over 17 years of experience working with children and adolescents. She is in her clinical work, her main focus is on marginalized communities, and she is an avid supporter of culturally sensitive initiatives and how those things translate into the treatment of marginalized communities. Dr. Christian graduated from Morgan State University with a bachelor's degree in sociology. She earned a master's degree in criminal justice from the Virginia Commonwealth University, a master's degree in professional counseling from South University, and a doctorate in counselor education and supervision from Argosy University's College of Counseling, Psychology, and Behavioral Sciences. Dr. Christian is a licensed professional counselor and a licensed mental health professional. She is employed as a director of operations for a community-based mental health agency in Virginia. She is an adjunct professor at the University of Southern California, and she is a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Dr. Christian, say hello to the people.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Oh, am I muted?
No, we can hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We can hear you.
Thank you so much for the invite. This always does my heart so good just to see people that look like me, that study what I study, that believe what I believe, which is that people that look like us should get the help that we need. Communities, I really got into this because communities that look like me didn't get the help that we were supposed to get. We kind of got scraps. And so I'm excited that I get to talk with so many people who believe in the work that we do. Thank you for the invite.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Christian. It's good to see you and welcome. Next, we have on our panel, Dr. Lanice Stevens. Dr. Stevens is the owner and supervising therapist at Hopeful Counseling. She is a native of Alexandria, Virginia, and she attended the well-known T.C. Williams High School. If you know anything about that high school, that's where they shot the movie Remember the Titans. So it's very big in this area. A lot of people know that high school. She has been featured in Ebony magazine speaking about mental health for Black women during the COVID pandemic. And she has also published various different literature pieces on the importance of keeping the forms of your daily exercise and daily routine to help reduce stress. Dr. Stevens is a two-time graduate of George Mason University with degrees in biology and psychology. She earned a master's degree in community counseling and a doctorate in counselor education and supervision from Argosy University's College of Counseling, Psychology, and Behavioral Sciences. Dr. Stevens is a licensed clinical counselor, a licensed professional counselor, a licensed clinical professional counselor, a nationally certified counselor, an approved clinical supervisor, and she is board certified in telemental health. One of the things I love about my relationship with Dr. Stevens is she is a certified spin instructor, and she got me into buying a Peloton machine a couple of years ago, and it has been one of the best things I have ever done. So Dr. Stevens, welcome and say hello to the people.
Hello. Thank you so much, Dr. Gibson and Dr. Waller, for having me again. I think when we did this in 2021, it was a great experience. And just to do this again, it does bring me joy. Like Dr. Christian has mentioned in regards to us as individuals who are resilient, I got into this because I wanted to know, how does that happen? And we talk about Black girl magic, but we also talk about Black people magic. And this is how that resiliency and that magic is created, and we're able to go and share it with others, and then they're able to go and transfer it to others. And it just keeps going and going. And so I'm glad to be here amongst my colleagues and peers again to have these conversations.
We appreciate you and welcome. And one of the things that I forgot to mention, you also teach amongst all of those other things that you do. So
yeah.
You and Dr. Christian teach together at the University of Southern California, but you also kind of know our background as well, because you also teach at the Trinity Washington University.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we've all kind of had our moment at Trinity. So it is great to see you, Dr. Stevens, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. And last but not least, we have Dr. Derico Wiley. Dr. Wiley is currently the Chief Clinical Director at the One Life Love Center in Greater Washington, D.C. He has been an adjunct professor at the Tennessee State University and Strayer University for the past 16 years. He is a triple graduate of the Tennessee State University, and I'm going to emphasize that because if I don't, he will, earning a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and a PhD in counseling and psychology. Dr. Wiley also earned a master's degree in executive leadership and in human services from Liberty University and a master's in clinical mental health counseling from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. Dr. Waller is a licensed professional counselor, a licensed clinical professional counselor. He is a nationally certified counselor, and he is board certified in telemental health. Dr. Wiley also has a strong background with the 100 because when he was in college, he joined the Collegiate 100 at the Tennessee State University. And last but certainly not least, I've got to throw a yo to the noobs in the building, my frat. And we want to welcome Dr. Wiley to the program. Dr. Wiley, say hello to the people.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me. It's always a joy to see people that look like me on the screen. And honestly, just having the conversation. I'm very big on breaking the silence on this whole thing about mental health. We don't talk about it enough. And then also to bring myself into the fold in terms of being a Black male. We don't see a lot of Black males in this field at all. And there are some Black boys and Black women out there that need to see people like myself, as well as people like you all. So thank you so much for having me.
Fantastic. Thank you, guys. I'm excited about this conversation. Before I turn it over to my co-moderator, Dr. Waller, I wanted to remind everyone that if you have any questions, we are streaming and running live. So please put them in the chat. And then when we get an opportunity during the second half of the program, we will circle back around and try to get as many of your questions in as possible. Also, I want to remind you to please share this this session with any of your friends. Click like and click share is what I like to tell people so that we can bring more people into the discussion and into the conversation. So with that, I want to turn it over to Dr. Waller. Dr. Waller, the floor is yours.
All right. Let's dive right into this wonderful panel that we have. I'm very excited. So some of the little rules that we have, you can break some of them, but so when I ask you a question, the first question that I have, I'll say a statement first. As parents, it can be very hard to practice self-care because one of the things that we do as a 100 Black men, we do mentoring. So it's important for us to understand what the needs are of our parents. So again, parents have a hard time practicing self-care because they're so busy prioritizing their children. Part of self-care is making sure we're managing our own anxiety as parents. We want to set good examples of how to face stress and anxiety with confidence. Your kids are watching you, so they absorb that information and they observe you and see exactly how you interact with the world. Part of this can be talking with your kids about how to deal with stress. So my first question would go to Dr. Christian. How should parents deal with their own anxiety while setting a good example for their kids?
Okay, good question. So I think the first thing, we always use the oxygen mask, right, analogy, but it's very serious. So if you're on a plane, if you actually listen to the instructions, and I do, because I never know if I got to be an American hero, right? So I don't know. So you're told if in any event, unlikely or not, the oxygen mask drop, please make sure you put yours on first. And I was traveling with children for Thanksgiving, and I never experienced this before, but the flight attendant stopped me and said, "You're aware of the policy with traveling with children, right?" And I was like, "Oh yeah." And the kids asked me, and I said, "Well, it just means that for some reason an oxygen mask fell down, I need to put mine on first so I can be calm to help you all." It's the same thing when we think about self-care and anxiety, right? It is literally life-saving. And that's how we have to view that. And I know as parents, we tend to think I have 20 things to do, and then I'll kind of get to myself. But you are no good to your children if you are no good to yourself. So one of the first things we want to do is take care of ourselves first. That may mean getting our own counseling. That might mean that instead of having lunch, right, on Tuesday, you have a chat and chew with the counselor. Because if that's the only time you can carve out, then that's the time that you carve out. But it's vital to do, and I'll tell you why. When you are stressed beyond measure, it is naive to think that your children won't feel that. They will. And it becomes unhealthy when they do. And so when they begin to feel that, they're going to be anxious because you, as the leader of the family, as the leaders, whoever's in there, you all are actually sending them a message that says something's wrong. So the first thing I tell you to do is to get your own help, right? Talk to someone yourself. The second thing I tell everyone to do is create rules and create communication in your actual family. So if mom, dad needs a break, it's okay to tell that to your children. It's okay to say, hey, mommy's having a rough time right now. You all have TV on, you all have food. Mommy's got to go in the bathroom for about 15, 20 minutes, and she's going to come out, and then we can spend some time together. It's okay to set those rules in your house, because what we actually know is that when houses are and families are willing to talk about their feelings, we really produce healthier families, right? And so that's one of the things we got to do. Come up with your own code words as a family, whatever it is. And then don't be afraid to apologize to your kids if you just got it wrong, right? We've sent this message that we don't need to apologize to our kids. It sends the wrong message. If you got it wrong, it's okay to say that. That's one of the best ways to take care of yourself, and then not pass the anxiety down to your children. So really good question.
All right. Any other panelists want to make any statements about the question?
I actually want to add to Dr. Christian, and she did a beautiful job giving insight in ways to manage anxiety and stress within a family unit, but also the collectivism of the family unit. And kids are looking to their parents for the answers, for the how-tos, and the ways to manage things, or how to interact with others. They're looking to their parents. And so I actually want to add to it is it's okay for parents to do things on a collective measure. And it's okay for kids to observe their parents communicating and engaging and sharing how they're feeling, not just the pleasant feelings, but also the unpleasant feelings. I work with so many individuals, young adults, that I hear the expression, that did not happen in my household. My parents did not talk about that in my household. And so to get to be an adult and not have actual blueprint of how to maneuver these areas of life, it is stressful. And then we're going to add on the social stressors of life and our cultural stressors of life. And then still, I don't have a foundation of how to even navigate. So if we're doing the mask analogy, also let's do a collective analogy. Let's get out. Let's get the movement going. Let's get kids seeing how you talk to the teachers, not just when things are going, I don't like to say bad or wrong, but when things are not going so good, but also when things are going good. So kids can develop that language and be able to add to the conversations that can speak to things that are going to feel good for them, not just the materialistic things, but then also even be able to verbalize and put words to when things are not feeling so good for them.
Thank you for sharing that. My next question is about stress and anxiety with adolescents, because a lot of times most people can tell when someone who is an adult is stressed, when someone who's an adult is depressed. So how is that different when it's an adolescent? So I want to ask Dr. Ball, can you describe the difference with adolescents when they're experiencing depression and anxiety in comparison to it being so different from adults?
That's actually a great question. And one of the biggest differences with adolescence is that it shows up as irritability sometimes. So rather than, when we think of an adult, especially an adult female, men are also very different. But when we think of an adult female who's experiencing depression, we expect to see sort of sad mood, that sort of, that idea of what we stereotypical depressed mood. We don't see that in men. In the same way. In men, they often show up with sort of apathy and a numbness, rather than a sadness. Men show up with sort of irritability and anger. And we see that a lot as well in adolescence. And so sometimes a kid who may be acting out in school, or is suddenly not doing their homework, or they were really into their soccer team and now they don't want to go to soccer practice anymore. They don't want to leave their bedrooms. Those kinds of things are red flags. Now, the problem with adolescence is even a non-depressed adolescent doesn't always want to leave their bedroom, right? So, I've got a almost 18-year-old kid that I sometimes see in passing. So it is not always easy to tease out what is just sort of normal teenage angst versus what is, true mental health concerns. And I think, this is where, piggybacking on the earlier question, where a parent who is in touch with their own mental health triggers and mental health needs can find that out a little bit easier, because they have the words. I'm not above saying to my son, is everything okay? How's school going? What's making you happy right now? Being able to ask the questions that pulls this kid out. Sometimes it's also, I know, again, I'm just going to keep using my son as an example. If I try to have a face-to-face conversation with him, I get absolutely nowhere, right? He's actually been said to me before, all this talking, I can do without it. But if we sit next to each other on the couch watching the Super Bowl, or, we're big baseball fans here, and I'm taking an interest, he suddenly decided he wanted to learn chess. And by asking him about what is going on, I can start to tease out what is really behind some of the behaviors that I'm seeing. So I think with adolescence, we have to sort of go just beyond the actual behaviors that we're seeing and see if we can figure out what is some of the contributing factors to the behaviors that are manifesting.
Can I say one thing?
Sure.
So
Dr. Wilder.
I actually think that sometimes children show up like adults and sometimes adults show up like children.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it just depends on the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that we all have things like when we need to recharge. When you look at your cell phone, when you see that thing getting red, it's time to recharge that
Mm-hmm.
thing, right? And when in your car, you're gonna need some gas. You see the E-light going towards the gas light is coming on. It's time to put some more gas in that thing. Same thing as human beings. We need time to recharge so that we can control our mental. Kids need it as well as adults. We have to figure out in our houses how we have those open dialogues, how we have those conversations about it. And I'll use my son as well. My son does not like to talk at all. Okay. When I'm talking to him, he's like, give me a minute. Now I can text him all day because, they stuck to their phone, stuck to the games. And so you just have to find an interesting or a creative way of reaching them. But as long as those conversations are happening, you can get to the nitty gritty or get to the meat of the problem. But I just wanted to say that it's not necessarily a male thing, in my opinion, or a female thing, or an adult thing, or a child thing at times. Because sometimes I show up very emotional at times. And my mom, she shows up very pulled back. So it's just different. If they show up different than they're usually showing up, then that's when you see that as a red flag. That's my opinion about that.
Can I add something really?
Sure.
Dr. Wiley, you definitely hit on a lot of good points here. And the language with kids is changing so much. When I was younger, my dad or mom used to ask, how was school today? Good. Okay. And then move on to the next, right?
Yes.
But now we have an opportunity. Okay, define good. What made it good?
Hmm.
Or asking kids, okay, tell me, what did you feel today? I know you had math and science, but what type of feelings showed up today? So getting that part of their brains, their frontal parts of their brains, to have that language development is what can definitely fuel to have these conversations when we talk about anxiety, when we educate them about stress, and when we talk about mood disorders.
I agree.
I would also like to jump back in, if you don't mind, to go back to the idea Dr. Wiley mentioned, the idea of pouring from an empty cup, that needing to recharge. And, we're from a generation where kids are super structured. They go into school and then after school it's such and such, and then they're in this after school activity and they're, all trying to get into the best colleges and that, only let in 2% of the people. And I think as parents, we don't really respect how much pressure that is from a day-to-day existence, literally to wake up in the morning and be on all day. Even I'm a professor, but I stop and internet shop sometimes in the middle of the day. Like, I have opportunities to bring myself down that kids don't have. And I think we need to be aware of that and sometimes give them the space to just be, without having any agenda.
That's good.
So I have a question, if you don't mind, Dr. Wall. I don't mean to take the floor,
Come
but
right in.
my 10-year-old, for the last probably maybe 3 or 4 months, he's been having some issues at school, and they've been ranging from a few different things. And I think a lot of it is the true lack of structure. They brought in a new teacher. He is in 4th grade, so he's changing classes now. And they brought in a new teacher, and I don't think that she may be as seasoned as some of the others. And so in that class, at the end of the day, it goes from like 4 to like a 12. And so, there has been some issues in school. Like he's had to been pulled to the principal or to the counselor's office or whatever. My question to the panel, and I don't care, which direction it goes, when the structure is different, or there is a shift in structure, and what the parents are trying to convey to the child at home is different from what he is being told at school or in another environment. How do we as parents kind of sort of manage up with that to try to make sure that we're balancing? Because in our space, we're trying to, set the right foundation and framework and make sure that we're giving the right or teaching the right moral compass is how we see it, right? But when a child goes out into the world, they're grasping so many of these different things, and we're trying to balance that out without trying to isolate them. So just to put some context to that, in 4th grade, now the little boy, like, they're learning curse words, and they're learning all these little sayings and the this and the that. And so when we come back into the home, we don't play that. So like you're not gonna be, all of these, I'm not your bruh, I'm not your dude, I'm not, you know what I'm saying? But when they go back to the school environment, those type of things are allowed. And so how, as parents, do we balance that and still be able to give a child the freedom to be a tween, an adolescent, a teen, and have their freedom, but still be able to keep them on track to learn the right foundational things?
So let me jump in and say, because that sounds like a 2-part question.
Yeah.
It sounds like the one part is how have children sort of changed since we were children? Because the baby boomers definitely had a lot more. They were a lot stricter. So the one question to me is, how have children sort of changed? And how do we have to evolve as parents to help create a balance at home as well as a balance at school? Because before, parents just were strict, and they said you have to just do what the teacher tells you to do, and if the teacher calls me, you're in trouble. And that worked, but it doesn't work as much as it used to.
Yeah.
So it's a 2-part
can
question.
Can I start off with that? And I just want to, I don't have children, and I'm not a parent, and I promise I don't pretend to be a parent. However, with children, this is a great time to start asking them what their beliefs are about these 2 different environments. Because 4th and 5th grade, this is where kids begin to create those negative beliefs or those positive beliefs about themselves based upon those environments that they're majorly in. However, with kids, they tend to go with the negative beliefs that they've told themselves being in these 2 environments. I can do this here, but I can't do that there. Oh, I'm like this here, but I'm viewed as this here. So getting to see what are you telling yourself, given that you have these 2 different dynamics and how you can operate. Yeah, you can probably go and curse at school because dad and mom is not around. But what about when you come home? What does that look like? What are you telling yourself there? And this is where really talking about the beliefs that kids create for themselves at a young age. This is what leads to those maladaptive behaviors or those protective behaviors that they guard themselves with, because they're navigating in between 2 different paradigms and dynamics. And so I just want to, talking about beliefs and what they're telling themselves is a great start, just to see how a youth is viewing themselves outside the home as well as inside the home and in their community.
I agree. I think that, when we look at the context of how our kids different, right? And you see parts of our kids now are far more expressive and owning their feelings, right? I think more than we've ever been. And we pass this message down from generation to generation of just kind of suck it up, grin and bear it, deal with it. That's come at a cost, though. And so what's happened is that now you've got this generation of young people who are seemingly smart-mouthed, right? But it's because we were silenced for so long. So the opposite of it is, you got the nerve to get an attitude with me. No, this child is just really just saying, I'll never forget this. And my little cousin, we're best friends, right? Like he's 11 now, right? Sebastian. And so for his 9th birthday, family comes over, we're in COVID, all that. And everyone's like, I called you. You didn't call me back. He says to the entire family, I just wanted peace for my birthday. And I stopped and I said, well, what are we going to say to that? Right? What's your fight back with that? Because as adults, we get it. And so what he was really saying was that it was overwhelming to get that many phone calls. We could take that as him being snippy. He wasn't. He was literally answering the question, which was, I just wanted peace. He wanted to make pizza with his parents and his little brother and eat cake. That's all he wanted. As adults, we kind of want the same thing, right? And I think what has happened is that when we've taught our kids for so long now, you've got to work twice as hard to be viewed as half as good. You've got to get into this kind of college or have this kind of job or do this in the military. You can't just be in the military. You got to get rank. You have to do all these things. They come along with a certain degree of assertiveness that our culture has not been prepared for. So we believe that our kids are drifting away from how we raised them. In reality, to Dr. Lanisa's point, our kids are now learning how to walk in two worlds that we've not had to do before, or we didn't do it until college or the workforce. Our kids are doing this now in K through 12, because what we know is that no matter how level we thought the playing field was, it's not. And so our kids are recognizing, in order for me to get here, I've got to move like this. And here's the other part too. We want our kids to go to these great schools. And sometimes these schools don't have a lot of people that look like us. And so kids take on some communication styles that are not familiar to us. And so we've got to recognize that our kids sometimes literally are carrying the weight of the world. That double consciousness concept is not over. Right? Our kids have to exist in our homes and our families in one way, and then we send them to schools and they've got to thrive there too. So our kids are literally learning how to play two games at one time. And so the safest space for them to express those feelings and own those feelings is at home, with parents, with family, with their village. We can teach you how to communicate it, but we got to make sure that we're receptive, because we've created the environment for these kids to thrive, right? But it comes with something when you want your kid to look and move like that. The last part to that, Dr. Darren, I say to you, if ever there's an educator who's not giving your child what your child needs, right? And I'm going to say this real country, go to the schoolhouse.
Yes,
okay?
Please. Come on.
That's how I grew up, right? I say that all the time. Like, you need to go to the schoolhouse. I will never forget. I was in school, and my teacher in 2nd grade, you put down what you want to be when you grow up. I said, I want to be president of the United States. She said, Black girls don't become that. So change it to maid or secretary. And I said, okay. Because parents tell you when you go to school, listen to your teacher. Your teacher's always right. So I went home and I said to my parents, y'all told me I could be anything. I could only be a maid or a secretary. Nothing wrong with either job. My father, a plumber, said I'll be at the school tomorrow. Okay?
Hello?
And that's the generation that's got to come home, take a shower, change clothes, and then go down to the schoolhouse. Right? You have to literally take ownership of that, because the same way every doctor doesn't have good bedside manner, every teacher who has a license to teach should not teach. That's the true reality.
Mm.
Sometimes you got to go to the schoolhouse and check on your child.
Thank you so much for that. Dr. Waller, we did have a question that popped up. I don't know if you wanted me to interject or do you want to keep going?
Absolutely, jump in.
There's a Miss Trailer, Miss Linda Trailer. Her question was, how important is it in this day and age to make sure that our youth are aware of their responsibilities for their own feelings, their behaviors, and their actions? So if you'd like for me to read it again, how important is it in this day and age to make sure that our youth are aware of their responsibilities for their own feelings, their behaviors, and their actions? Who wants to jump in?
So I'll jump in here. I actually teach dually enrolled, so I have the pleasure of teaching high school students while we're in college, which has been an interesting dynamic.
Wow.
And one of the things we keep talking about there is that your behavior speaks so loudly that people can't hear anything else you're saying. And so, that we are 100% responsible for our behavior. And so, I can feel however I want to feel. That doesn't necessarily entitle me to behave any way that I want to behave. And so, we talk a lot about what we're feeling, how to process that, how to make sense of that. But then I have this thing I always say to them, that you have to figure out how to respond and not react to what is going on. And so, taking a step back, so if someone says something to you and it upsets you and you immediately come out, it's probably going to be one of those where, later on that day, you're going to feel a little bit, maybe I didn't handle that the way I should have. But if you can take a step back and dissect your feelings and process how you're feeling, and then craft a response, it is usually a much more thoughtful response. So for me, I tell students all the time, I am very big. They're always funny because I'm Jamaican, right? And I can be pretty fiery and I get, real aggressive. And they're always like, I've never been in a fight in my life. And they're like, no one's ever pissed you off that bad. Like, people piss me off all the time. But it is learning to understand my own triggers, right? To give myself a timeout if I feel like I'm upset or sad or anxious, and giving myself the opportunity to come back and respond in a time that is much more adaptive has allowed me to avoid all kinds of dramas in life, because tiny things don't need to become major things. A tiny fight a tiny disagreement in between two peers, and now one of them pushes the other, and there's there's major injury. And there's so many consequences to our behaviors that we have to learn to own them. And so, like I say all the time, your behavior speaks so loudly, I can't hear anything you're saying. And I think if they say that over and over, they learn pretty quickly that they want to project a certain image and they have to behave in the way that matches the image of who they want to be.
I just want to stress the importance. Well, first of all, what you said was spot on. But just the importance of the parent being able to be available for their kids, because sometimes parents don't know how to do it themselves. Mm-hmm. And so when you have that dynamic, you have a person that doesn't know how to do it, and then you're expecting the child to be responsible for their feelings, their actions, and their behaviors, but they weren't taught that. Mm-hmm. And so for me as the parent to expect them to know how to do it, and then in turn become parentified a little bit because now you're teaching me how to do it. Mm-hmm. Like, as a parent, we have to do better. We have to make sure that we get our mental health checked and make sure that we know how to do these things, that we're putting these expectations on these children to do it, and letting them know it's okay to feel. Some people don't know that it's okay to truly feel. Mm-hmm. And because they don't know it's okay, they don't know how. And so just really that psychoeducation around feelings, behaviors, and actions is very key. And really as a parent, so that you can then implement that in your household with your children.
I want to add to this. And the word that keeps coming to mind is vulnerability. Mm-hmm. And we do not do good as people in general. And Black folk, I'm going to just take it there. Black folk, we don't do well with teaching that actual vulnerability is a strength. Mm-hmm. But me to stand and say, I feel sad, I'm mm-hmm. feeling some type of way, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that. Just not the pleasantries. When I'm able to stand in my truth then yes, I'm able to be vulnerable. And now I'm able to receive whatever it is that I need that's going to help me get back to my baseline. We don't do well with talking about vulnerability. We don't do well with using I am statements. We don't do well with letting those raw sensations really be present along with the good ones that come about.
Mhm.
And so that's one thing I try to stress to most when I counsel women about vulnerability, because they're at that point where it's like the cusp, they're right there, and then they have children that are watching them. And Dr. Christian is right. Yes, we come from a generation or generations where things have been silenced, and now you got kids that are boisterous, and of course their voice is going to seem louder than normal. But at the same time, these kids are actually exercising what vulnerability looks like and feels like for them, whereas though their parents or elders really haven't given them a frame of reference or really given them the opportunities to exercise that within the home.
That's good.
My next question is on the lines of seeing vulnerability firsthand on our television, on our cell phones, on our whatever social media platform that you have. We're often seeing just violence on television, police brutality, the incidents that happened in Memphis. And mass shootings are more prevalent than they've ever been before. So as our children are monitoring these things, they are suffering from vicarious trauma. Mm-hmm. So my question to the panel is, how should parents deal with our children viewing these things in social media, their cell phones, and et cetera? I mean, can we just tell our children, hey, put the cell phone down, put the iPad down, don't, let's remove everything? So how do we sort of deal with that?
I mean, that would be a perfect world to remove all those electronics, man. However, but then we would never know what's really going on if we didn't have access to it, right? This is a tough one. And, I will say I'm still processing the things that have happened in this country in regards to racial disparities and police brutality. Largely because I have a father, or my father has transitioned, but I have a brother, I have a partner. I have male cousins. And so to know that this is susceptible to anyone at this point in our lifetime, it's difficult to process. And then being in the seat as a mental health provider, at times it's like, what do I say? But the one thing that has come out of my prayers and my readings and my devotions and meditation, we have to be able to shift the conversations to teaching our kids about how we can gain compliance versus forcing compliance, which is what has typically we have been seeing. What forcing compliance has looked like has led to these massive measures of brutality. And that is not how we gain compliance. And so to have those mixed messages, I would be confused and scared to do anything as well. And I wouldn't know how to communicate that to the next person. So having defined measures in regards to what compliance looks like, how we can go about getting it without uses of force. Because right now we have no baseline in this country. We really don't. We have no baseline on how to gain compliance in the absence of physical brutality.
This is one of the most difficult conversations, just in general, for all of us, really. But as a Black man, having a Black son, mm-hmm. and being a mental health provider, like, I don't know what to say. Like, at times I'm like, I don't know, because we talking about me. At the end of the day, I'm that person that's in the car that's afraid of my life. 10 and 2. I'm like, I'm that person. What do I do? All these degrees behind your name, it don't matter. They don't care about doctor this, nurse this. They don't care. And so it's very difficult for me. And I'm just being vulnerable in this moment because I think it's important for people to know that none of us are perfect and nobody has all the answers. But one thing that I can say is that the conversations are needed. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to block my child's cell phone. I want him to see it, and I want him to feel comfortable coming to me and say, Dad, why did this happen? Dad, my friend, this happened to my friend. And honestly, that's like a tearjerker for me because, you know, it's happened to us, you know what I mean? And it's happened to his friends. And so at times I don't have the words to say. And so as a Black father, you know, you always want to be present. As a Black mother, you always want to be present and be able to have the right words. But just know that you can sit there and have the conversation together and let each other, I don't know, but this is what we're going to do. This is our plan of action. And sometimes that's all you can do. We don't have the answer, but it's just about having that conversation and just opening those lines of communication to discuss it. That's what I would say at this point, because I'm also still processing.
So let me jump in. Can I jump in only because of the fact that, you know, I'll be the first to say that I am not a clinician by any means. So I'm going to defer to all of you great people with all of these great licenses, etc. But what I can say is just being an individual Black man with Black male children, outside of that portion of it, when I saw the unfolding of what happened in Tennessee, I was just so angry. Like, I was extremely angry and just hurt and just, I had to process it on my own. And I think, Troy, Dr. Waller, you had boys too, right? You had boys as well, right? You had male.
Yes, two sons.
Yes.
Two sons. And
Teenagers.
And you have a son. And so having that conversation with my son, the younger one at 10, because not only were they talking about it at school and in aftercare and all these other places, what the children were saying, and the older kids, you know, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, they had their own story, and that kind of strayed away from the facts. But bringing it home, it was difficult for me to talk about because I hadn't processed it myself.
Yeah.
And so to that end, I definitely agree with Dr. Wally that those conversations are very important to have. But as parents, we also have to be able to draw the line with what we feel is prominent to the conversation, to be able to guide your children in the direction that they should go, and be able to exclude our personal feelings about it in that moment. Because for me, I try to teach my children that, you know, the police are your friend. If you are in danger, this is who you should go to. You know, you need to follow authority. If you get pulled over, pulled to the side, etc. And I don't want them to be fearful, like I cannot or I should not trust, you know, the police, etc. Even when they were little kids, like, you know, if we were in the Target and so and so got separated, you know, my go-to would be find the police officer.
Yes.
Right? My second go-to would be find a mother that had other kids. If you see a female that had other kids with her, generally speaking, that would be a safe space. But the first go-to would be find a police officer, right?
Yeah.
When you now see all of these images of what's happening around the world, and we as Black people are not being protected, you know, from a social policy person, it is disheartening as heck to me, right? But in the same token, I cannot transfer that energy onto my children. So that line is very, very thin. So, you know, as adults, we also have to navigate. So what are your recommendations or strategies? You know, Dr. Wally said, have that conversation, but how do we do it? You know, because children at different ages, they learn different things. You know, my 8-year-old and the 12-year-old or 13 or 14, their conversations are a little different than, you know, 2nd or 3rd grade. So, you know, what are some strategies that parents can use to be able to have those conversations without skewing the conversation with their opinion? Like, be able to give the facts, but give enough content so that the child can grasp what, you know, you're talking about without, you know, overly exerting your opinion. Because at the end of the day, the majority, I'm hoping, and I say this loosely, the majority of police officers get up every day and they do their job in good faith, right? But we don't know who we're going to get when we get pulled over. So we have to be mentally prepared. And our children growing up in this society as teenagers and now starting to drive and all these other things, they also have to be prepared. They have to have that foundation to have those talking points. So how do we start that? Where does that start?
You know,
So I'm going to say, I'm just going to deal with the adults and then I'm going to defer to my colleagues for the children, right? Because what often happens is as adults, we are projecting adult stuff onto children, right? So here's what I mean when I say that. I decided a long time ago I was going to stop watching Black people die on TV. And then COVID hit, and I felt compelled to watch the murder of George Floyd. And then I watched maybe 17 seconds of the video of Tyree Nichols. I was physically ill. And I said to Black men in my life, my partner, etc., this is why sometimes when I call and I'm frantic, that's my trauma speaking to you. Because I don't know what happens when you leave here, right? That's an adult conversation because my responses are far more clipped and almost primitive. That is scary to a child, right? So we got to have the adult conversations with adults first, because if not, to children, it just sounds like everybody in the house is mad and upset. And kids personalize. So that means I did something wrong and you didn't, right? So I think the first thing we got to do is, as adults, we've got to talk and process our feelings with adults. Because if we don't process it with adults, sometimes we can develop an unrealistic fear with our children and not give them rationale for why we say what we say. Like my nephew's 28. He's 6'3", with a beard and tattoos and all of that, right? And when I say to him, be safe, I had to start, even at 28, I had to start giving him the rationale behind why I say it, right? It wasn't just to be in your business, although I'm your aunt, so I can be, right? It was literally because my fear is saying, I can't protect you when you leave our site. I had to say that to him, but I had to say it to an adult first. He's an adult, but not, right? I had to say it to an adult first so that we could work through what I was really feeling. Because when he's like, Aunt Tasha, I'm fine, that was making me mad. And I'm like, you're fine, but you just don't know. And he's like, well, I don't know what you're saying. And I couldn't say what I was saying because I didn't want to utter words because you feel like you're going to put it into the universe, right? I had to talk to adults and say, I need them to get what I'm saying. And I had to talk it out to them to then bring it back to children. So I'm going to defer to my colleagues for the rest. But I just think that as parents, as support systems, as villages, we have to talk with adults first so that we don't instill that. Kids will take it personal and then they shut down. And then you've got a whole household that's grieving and no one's saying why.
So that sounds like, to me, Dr. Christian, it's the adult conversation is the processed truth, right?
Yes.
And you can't have a unprocessed dialogue with a child. You got to process it first.
Absolutely.
As adults.
I actually would say though that sometimes I think it is okay to model emotionality to a child, right? Because there are some times where sadness and grief are the overriding emotions. And sometimes if a kid is also feeling that and mom or dad is too sort of buttoned up, that can also make the child feel as though something is not right. So I don't think, I know when I watched the video, I watched it with tears streaming, right? And I come at this discussion a little bit different because I didn't grow up here. And so I didn't grow up with the story about police officers not being people you can trust. I grew up with my grandfather being the chief of police and police were good people. And so when I moved here and all of this started, I remember feeling guilty. Did I do something wrong to bring my wonderful Black boy, who's also named Sebastian, by the way, into this world? And I also have a daughter who Darren knows her very well. I joke all the time. She is just a little bit ratchet at times, right? She's the one that I worry about more than Sebastian. She's in, crazy parts of town, doing all kinds of dramatic things. But I have to process some of that guilt, but also just the emotion. And Sebastian and I sat here watching the video together because Sydney is away at college. And I was talking to him about the sadness I was feeling as a mother and what it felt like to me to watch another mother deal with a loss that I would, I just know would flatten me. And I think, you know, we didn't go deep into it, but I think that transparency was also very helpful. And, you know, he and I were sort of both able to talk about our sadness about what some of this looks like without actually making it necessarily an anti-police discussion, right? It was very much just a real human moment that we, you know, we watched this man die. We just watched this man die. And what does that look like? And, you know, taking it apart from the police, these kids watch this kind of stuff all the time. You know, I mentioned that I do the dual enroll kids, and one day they had a shooting outside of Coolidge a couple weeks ago. I don't know if you remember seeing this on the news. All my kids are from Coolidge, and they literally had just gotten back on the bus from Trinity, you know, to get to Coolidge, and there's this person dead on the sidewalk. These are realities that I know I didn't grow up with. And so I think allowing kids to own their sadness, allowing kids to understand that you as an adult don't have all the answers, and you also need to process, you know, like I wrote a blog after Tyree Nichols, and I told my students, I was like, I needed to write that because I needed to figure out what I was feeling. And I think that's also very helpful. So I think there's a big thing about being vulnerable, having your emotions be real, and that kids know, you know, what you're feeling, because real emotions are what we live with on a day-to-day basis, you know, as young kids all the way through the lifespan.
I would like to add to this, and I keep hearing the word process. And when we see things that are of tragedies, processing is not the first go-to. Think about it. If I think, well, with the news recently, with the fires that have happened in houses and apartment buildings, the first thing you see the news people do, go to one of the residents and put the microphone and camera in their face. And so we've kind of taken this action that we had this immediacy urge to go and put language to something. When all of us are aware about trauma education, when we've seen and experienced trauma and traumatic situations, words are not the first thing that's going to come up. And we have to pay attention to those sensations. And I know for a while, working with kids back in the day, a lot of teachers and clinicians would correct kids when they say, you know, I'm feeling some type of way. And I tell them, don't do that, because actually they're giving us their language to say something's happening. I just don't know what words to put to it. And
it's the culture.
It is culture. So we cannot disconnect and shut down how these kids are communicating to us when they are experiencing tragic and trauma situations. So processing is not always the first go-to. Sitting with that, just like loss and grief, if we're losing a loved one, we sit, we cry, we mourn. And then we're able to put the words to it in support of being able to really communicate and can make those connections. And this is such, there's no right or wrong way. That's my stance. There's no right or wrong way. I think we as people would really like to have an instruction manual on how to. This is why mental health is our instruction manual on how to. Like Dr. Christian said, going and processing this with another adult. You know, I want to get the wiggles and jiggles out and the feelings out so I can go and have these difficult conversations with my children. One of the specialties that I love doing is EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. I love that because it focuses on the sensations that come up. And when we get into therapy, it's I think. Well, nobody's talking about what they're feeling. And so to have that as a supportive measure to intervene, it forces someone to really sit with what is coming up. What am I feeling about this? Even if it's nothing, well, that is something that you're feeling. It's neutral.
Because arguably feeling nothing has you more vulnerable than feeling something, right? Feeling nothing is a trauma response, right? You know, you've got, I know you are in the DMV and being plagued with a lot of violence, and I'm in Richmond, and there's, a significant, I think we had 2 murders yesterday. Kids are dying, just a lot. There's a return of gang violence, etc. And you start to talk and people are kind of like, oh, it just kind of is what it is. So life is not supposed to be lived like that. Right. And you have to say, so no, if you tell me you feel nothing, you are more at risk than someone who feels something, no matter what that feeling is. People tend to think that emotionality is just crying. No, anger is an emotion. Right. And so oftentimes when you are just totally numb to it, one of two things has happened. It's happened so much that literally your brain is no longer connecting that I should feel something. And so we've got misfires, or it's literally that you don't know that you can say that you can feel something.
Mhm.
And so that just becomes that kind of person. I think for all of you, all of us who are in practice, have done practice, that sometimes is your hardest client to work with, because life has taught you to stop feeling, right? And to just kind of press on. And that's survival mode. And that's unhealthy. Just no matter what it is, it's just an unhealthy space to live in.
So going on and talking about sensations, there's another aspect of that children deal with, and they deal with coping in a maladaptive way. And what I'm talking about here is self-harm. Sometimes when you feel all these different emotions, and the child doesn't know really what to do with these emotions and feelings. And the prevalence of self-harm in our society with our children has increased. It has spiked over the pandemic. So what do we do as parents when we see the scars on our children?
Can I start this off? Because this is where actually I really, I'm not going to say love, but I really get into the work of working with individuals that really suffer from depression and really get close to suicidality and really have self-harmed and attempted. Here's the thing. I think someone said it. I think Dr. Boss said it earlier. Depression is not what we have grown to know of it. Okay. You stick out like a sore thumb. You're not getting out of bed. You're not working. You're not doing this, not doing that. That is not the face of depression at all in 2023. And for us to continually carry that image and that thought that depression has a specific look, problem number one. Problem number two is that, again, going back to that vulnerability piece, when are we allowing our children to really say, like I said, I'm feeling some type of way. I don't know what it is, but I'm feeling some type of way. And so when that is cut off, because now I'm looking at, oh, this is kid talk, or this is teen talk, I don't need to pay attention. This is what you do with your friends, not here in this home. Again, we're creating a further barrier and disconnect. Going back to the beliefs, what are the beliefs you're telling yourself about yourself, negatively as well as positively? We do very well with hearing kids or wanting our kids to speak highly of themselves and teaching those elements to speak well over themselves and speak words into their life and speak motivation. But we don't give a spotlight into those negative beliefs that are actually growing just as rapidly as those positive beliefs. And so then we get kids that, okay, since I don't know these things, no one's teaching me. Okay, now I'm gonna adapt that. I know what I know based on what I know. Why do you do that? Oh, I know what I know based on what I know. No one's told me differently. And so when you get all of that jumbled together, yeah, of course you're gonna have some hopelessness and helplessness. You're gonna have some extreme lack of motivation. You're going to have some extreme lack of isolation. And I always, teach my clients as well as students, stress follows mood and mood follows stress. And if we're not talking about either one of those, then we might as well not be sitting here. And so I just want to start that conversation off. Depression is not what we have grown to know about it, not what is displayed in the commercials. We actually have individuals that are functional depressants. Yes. And they are operating at high levels as well as lower levels. And our kids are looking at us and it's like, okay, well, who can I talk to? What can I say? Because when I use my language, it's foreign language to someone. But when I go to my peer group, they understand me. But of course, as kids will listen to their peer group before they listen to their adults or their caregivers. But my peer group is going to help me self-soothe in a way that most likely is not beneficial.
I will say that we have to make space for those feelings for the children, because sometimes they don't know that it's okay to feel. Another thing is sometimes as adults, we get so caught up in adulting that we forget about our kids, we forget about our partners, whoever. Pay attention to, you might not even see the scars, and scars are not always visible. You know, scars can be emotional. And so to be able to see those red flags, stop being so clocked into work all the time. Stop being so clocked into a man or a woman or whatever it is. And pay attention to your kids. Pay attention to yourself as well, because you also have things that you need to deal with. It reminds me of, you know how they say, check on your strong friends. Same thing happened with kids. Sometimes adults can mask what they have going on, right? But we have to allow those spaces for people to be able to feel comfortable coming to you as an individual, as a parent, as a clinician, as whatever, to just be able to express how they're feeling. If you don't even have that open dialogue, then you have an issue, okay? You're going to have that person who is self-harming. You're going to have that person that's going to go somewhere else to look for advice, and they may not get that right advice. And so you just want to always make sure that you're available. But that even gets back to you knowing when you need to recharge, when you need to put some more gas in the tank, when you need to get some more sleep, when you need to eat. Sometimes during the workday, you know, I have problems sometimes too, to be fair. I forget to eat sometimes. That's not good, right? So just be realistic about it. You know, I'm a human too, but at the end of the day, I know what I need to do. And I'm just trying to, you know, say to you all to make sure that your cup is full as much as possible so that you can be present for somebody else. That's all I'm saying.
I would also say that this post-pandemic time that we find ourselves in is uncharted territory for all of us, right? So we all, may have gone into COVID one way. We've come out a completely different person. I literally just posted on Facebook. I tend to be a little bit introverted, but since COVID, I can come home on a Friday and not leave my house again till work on a Monday and not feel bad about that, right? And change from one pajamas to the other, which would be typical depression symptoms, which, I'm not depressed, but it's like I've learned to isolate myself. And that's what our kids have learned as well, right? And so I know in the classroom, I find, I'm standing in front, I'm back in person, but I have students who are silos, each student at their own desk, nobody talking to the other, because that's how we've been educating for the past 2 or 3 years. And so on some level, we have to retrain and re-socialize about how do we interact with people? Who do we figure out how to trust? How do we make friends? My own daughter was one of the ones in that 2020 cohort. So she graduated in the pandemic and started college in the pandemic. And, she's very verbal. So she will talk about how much she's missed because she's like, I don't have friends like you talk about having friends in college because I don't have the opportunity to meet them in the same way. And so for a kid who's high functioning, that's, problematic, but a kid who's already struggling, and then you throw them into this isolation, they don't have friends in the same way. They're struggling with that numbness that we talked about before, not necessarily sadness, just sort of an apathy. And then we see this huge rise in self-harm because it's something that allows them to feel, as crazy to those of us who don't do it, pain is better than numb. And so often we will see the cutting and other similar types of behaviors because it allows this kid to feel alive versus that sort of existing that they've been struggling with. So I do think we have to realize that post-pandemic strategies are very different. In the classroom as teachers, they're different. At home, they're different. With peers, how our kids make friends are very different. Like they may have friends, my son has friends in California all the time that he's on. And these are real friends for him. These are not friends for me to make fun of or downplay. Right? We have to respect that it's a different world. And as Dr. Stevens said, speak to the kids in the language they use. So unlike you, Darren, I happily let Sebastian use bruh at home. Like that stuff doesn't bother me in the same way because I feel like however he's expressing himself, I would rather that than silence, So I let him come to me, and wherever he is how he comes to me, and we're good with it.
So enough with that. One of our participants on the live, her statement was, we also have to give space for the fact that A lot of us grew up in the prevalent kind of old school manner where parenting, we expected children to do what we said, like robots is specifically her language, but when they're not expressing their emotions in the way we expect, we interpret that as disrespect or being disrespectful. So can anybody kind of speak to that? Because I'm in my 40s, headed towards 50, and so I kind of somewhat grew up in a what I would call an old school manner. And in today's society, the way the children again are growing up, as Dr. Stevens and Dr. Ball said, we have to somewhat meet them where they are. But in my mind, okay, like Dr. Ball just said, like my 10-year-old calling me bruh, I don't know how I feel about that. But as a parent, I may need to give that leeway and be able to, and create that space. So, speak to that and how some things aren't necessarily disrespectful. It might be the sign of the time or the language that the child is kind of using, or or the adolescent or tween is using at the moment, and it may not be seen, or it shouldn't be interpreted as perceived disrespect.
Right. And I'm kind of caught in that right now, actually. So I come from a household where it's very strict. You're going to do what I say to do. And that's just what it is. But I have a son who's 15, getting ready to be 16, and he's taller than me. He's 6'1", and I'm 5'11". So part of it, I'm like, let me back up a little bit. I can't really do what I really want to do. But sometimes, I do see myself as a cool younger dad. I'll be 40 this year, so I'm a younger dad. And so I do that from time to time. Like, what's up, bro? How you doing, bro? Like, and it makes him feel comfortable to come to me and talk to me. But you never want to shut your child out or whatever, saying you can't be yourself. And I know that's not what you're saying, but at the same time, for them, that may be what they feel you are trying to say or that you're trying to do. So I open up the lines of communication for those types of conversations. How do you talk to your friends? And I also say, invite your friends over. I want to see how you all interact. Of course I'm going to say, you maybe shouldn't be saying that or something like that, but I'm not as strict or as tough as my mom was. I try to kind of like have a balance. Balance is the best word for me in this situation.
Yeah, it's three points that I'm hearing everybody say. Number one, during COVID, I did realize, parents complained. It was their venting hour because the kids are home, they're working, kids getting on my nerves. But at the same time, I flipped it and said, do you know that you're getting on your kids' nerves?
Okay.
What do you mean? Yeah, that is a reality. Both realities do exist. So just as much as they're getting on your nerves, you're getting on theirs. And actually, they do have nerves, because what's the quickest? You ain't got nerves and da-da-da-da-da.
Enough. Yeah.
So that's the first thing, realizing that it works both ways. And so when we recognize that, it reduces this power struggle that happens between parents and children, because parents feel as though that their behaviors are out of sight, out of mind, do as I say, not as I do type of mentality. And I knew I was raised up on that. My father would say, you do as I say, not as I do. And it's like, okay, but who gonna call you out? Because you wrong too, right? So that's the first thing, the power struggle, and realizing that the reverse does happen with children. Secondly, we don't do a good job with asking individuals to define things. Like I said, how was school? Good. Define good. Because I want to know what you mean by good. Bruh, okay, well, define that. I'm old. I'm an old lady. Tell me what that means. And if you're telling it to me, then in my mind, I'm young and hip. I'm a young old, as I think what Cedric the Entertainer said, I'm young old. Well, define that for me so I can know whether or not I view this as disrespectful or not. Not taking away what your understanding of it is. I just want to know what does this mean? Because bruh means somebody who's related to me as my brother. So what does that mean? We don't do well with that. And so having children come up and being able to have this language that they have, social media has really given these children a voice. And so we've raised them to, like I said, do as I say, be obedient, listen to your teacher, you go to school every day, you follow what's happening in this house. But on the flip side, we're not also adding to developing their voice. So when they do give it back to parents or adults, it is looked at as, oh, you are being really disrespectful right now. Well, actually, no, they're not. You're just not used to hearing it. And so this is foreign language to you. And so if you allow them to exercise that a little bit more, maybe there'll be a balance within the communication and within the parent-child dynamics.
I
You know,
also
I think
know
go ahead.
when I talk to parents, I always try to remind them that kids are people, right? Because I think sometimes we've brought up like they're like, they're these little things that I'm in control of. But they're people, right? They have taste buds, and because I have all these parents who will say things like, well, they eat exactly what I make. And I'm like, but if they don't like broccoli and they don't like broccoli, why are they not allowed to express that they don't like broccoli? This seems like a simple thing, but it's a major deal. I don't like broccoli and I don't eat it because I'm a grown up. So why should I force my 4-year-old or my 5-year-old to eat it? So I think when we start to see children as actual individual people with personalities, with likes and dislikes, with wants and needs that are separate from mine, we can respond to kids differently. So when we know about parenting styles, authoritarian parents, like so many of us were raised with, I didn't. My mom was pretty authoritative. They're not the best case for success. You teach kids to follow the rules, but rule followers are not the ones who rule the world. If you really think about it, those are not the super successful people, are not the ones who follow the rules. So having a kid who understands why rules are there, what structure, but also being able to vocalize how they're feeling and maybe why they want to push back on a particular limit versus something else, and there being a dialogue, is actually what's best for children. So it's not disrespectful for a kid to vocalize their thoughts and their feelings and their wants. We can still teach kids how to talk to other people, but not necessarily stop them from talking to other people, if that makes sense.
No, it does. Because when you think about, oftentimes we're saying we want our children to be obedient, right? What we're really saying is, I want my children to listen to and do everything that I say
Right.
do. But we don't say to them, but society is also going to have a separate set of rules that might not match what happens in here. And so it is a very difficult concept for children to follow a rule that they don't understand. Because as adults, we can't do that. At work, I kind of got to know why and how we got here, right? That's unless it's something where it's imminent danger, tell me later, right? But in just regular day to day, I kind of got to know, how did we get here? Because if I don't know, I'm uneasy. And so it's slightly naive to think that children won't feel that way either, right? That kind of do as I say, not as I do, does not work if we're looking to produce children who are competing on the levels that we say we want them to compete on. Because what happens is, it's like the kid who grows up in a really racist community and they're the racist. And you look at this kid like, gosh, when you get to college, they are going to eat you alive because you're following the rules that people told you. You're believing what people told you and you're regurgitating it. And you're going to get to college or the workforce and you're going to meet people who are going to challenge that. The same thing applies to us in kind of what we do, which is, I'm just going to teach my kids to be obedient and to follow. Okay. And so then your kid becomes an adult and then can't articulate their feelings and their thoughts to other people. That doesn't translate into any other space but your home. And so then when you wonder why Johnny keeps getting a negative performance evaluation, because Johnny doesn't know how to communicate at work. And so Johnny's taking the mindset at work, well, just do it because I said do it. That does not translate in any other space but your home when your child is in that house, right? We can certainly explain to kids, so as your village, as your person, as your adult, these are some of the decisions that I'm making now because I think it's going to be safest for you. I think we get respect from kids at that moment. You want a child to endear you, right? And adore you in your latter days. Not to always say, my parent was hard on me. I think they love me and they showed me because they went to work every day, right? That you don't want that to be your child's memory of you. You want your child to say, my parent was not perfect by a long shot, but they loved me fiercely and here's how I know it. That's what we want as adults. The memory that our kids have of us, the legacy that we leave is that they made a lot of mistakes, but they tried to get it right with me. right? We send this message that says, I love you because I'm doing this. Kids don't receive that well. Then they become adults who can't receive love, right? Again, the cost is too great when we're thinking we're producing obedient robots who are really dogs. Because do we want our kids to be dogs? Because when you let a dog off the leash, they run. You want your kids to always know they can come home.
That's it.
Awesome.
Nicely put, Dr. Christian.
That was good.
Dr. Waller, I think we have time for maybe one more question, and then we'll go ahead and do the wrap up. Our chapter president is going to come on and do some closing remarks for us. So I'll defer to you.
Well, I guess any parting words from each of the panelists. I think we've gotten a huge amount, a wealth of information, and I have enjoyed the dialogue. I have enjoyed receiving the knowledge. I'm a clinician as well, but I've learned new things. So, any parting words from all of our panelists? Just briefly, probably 1 minute statement, and we can go around the room. Who would like to start?
I can start. As a former clinician, I think my final words would be: don't be afraid to reach out for help. Don't feel that, perfection is necessary, right? There's so many times where we absolutely are struggling. Even the most sophisticated and wonderful and successful of us needs a hand up at times. And so as a parent, just as an individual, don't be afraid to reach out for help. And that can be in all kinds of ways. That can be going to get your own counseling. That can be having a social support network that is important from you. That can be reaching out to your kid. That can be also, as you mentioned, sometimes just flat out saying, mommy needs a timeout and she's going to go to bed early today. Don't be afraid to own your own mental health needs and to prioritize those above everything else, to make sure that you are your best you as you're facing, your life with your children, your life with your partners, your life at work and church and wherever else you're sort of being taken from. You have to remember to feel yourself.
Yeah, that's really good. And keep mine very simple. Show up for yourself so that you can show up for other people. It's very, very important to do that. And then lastly, it's time for us to start speaking highly of our kids, calling them the kings and queens that they are. That language is very, very important. Not these negative things that people tend to do, but kings, queens, leaders, all those types of talks, positive talk to your children.
That was it right there. We are the experts on us, right? Nobody can Black people like Black people. And when we just can't be, it's who we are.
That's the quote. That's it.
That's it. That is it.
And when we do it and we do it right, no one, literally no one can stop us. When we get it, when we get our value, our worth. We've survived too much to let this part of life stop us. We've survived too much. We just have to heal now.
I'm going to use the 4-letter word that we do not use well: rest. We do not do well with resting. And that is my mission this year. That people are resting, because getting restful sleep, this is what wards off stress, anxiety, depression, mania, psychosis. We cause enough stress for ourselves. I don't need anybody else adding on to it. And if I'm not resting, then that opens the door for me to take on other stress, which can get me down, snowball down that slippery slope. So resting is what I will not ask, but actually it's a requirement. You have to rest. Not watching TV while folding clothes, not watching TV and responding to emails, not watching TV and trying to cook dinner too and eat it. No, separate.
You don't know my life.
I do know your life, because your life is probably
You don't know my life.
I heard Dr. Wiley say he don't have time to eat, and I said, "How, Sway? I'll make sure I find some time." But resting is something that we do not do well, and I encourage everyone to seek that opportunity to step away from the work. The work will be there. There's no need or reason to feel guilty or shameful for resting, in support of being able to do better.
I literally was going to say, from my own perspective, as the only non-clinician on the panel, or have never been a clinician, from my space, I think it's extremely important to be able to recognize that there is a need for work-life balance. So to piggyback on what Dr. Stevens has said, for me, it is extremely important for me to not only give 110% at work, but in my personal life and with my family and with my friends, and take that vacation and take that PTO time and take that mental health day or 2 or 3. I literally had a faculty member that reports to me retire in December. This person had over 3,000 hours of leave that had built up over the course of like 30 years. Trust me when I tell you, I'm maxing out my leave every year. Because even if I'm going to sit at home and look at TV and call Uber Eats, I am going to get my rest. So I think that work-life balance is extremely important. So that's my first takeaway. My second one, and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Waller, is it's important for me to be able to say this and be able to rest on this. We need to let everybody know that you are not out here alone. There are people that you can talk to, whether it's professional, personal, friends, pastoral, whatever it is that you may need. Do not suffer in silence. I think that is probably one of the biggest things that I can say, if not to try to help close out this meeting. One of the things that my good friend, Dr. Christian, always, her mantra is, life is to be thrived and not just survived. We are to thrive in this particular diaspora. And so for that, if you feel any kind of way and you think that you can't work through it on your own, reach out to your sphere of influence, even if it's just someone there that may not be able to give you advice, but just to listen and just to be a listening ear and some motivation and encouragement to help put you back on the right track. You are not alone. So for that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Waller.
I mean, I'll piggyback on that last statement. Pain and isolation is intolerable. You have to be able to communicate and listen to other people in order to just heal yourself.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
This is a wonderful panel. I had a great time. I hate that it has to end, but we got to get some rest.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Our chapter president, Dr. Lamont Bunyan, is going to be joining us. He is going to give us some words to be able to close out this section. Dr. Bunyan is here. I'll turn it over to our president.
Wow, just got on the screen. Hello, everybody. It's been awesome listening to all you excellent Black doctors. I see my friends here. And thank you so much for putting on this mental health strategies virtual town hall sponsored by Black Prince George's. For all of our viewers out there, thank you so much for spending the last hour with us. I just want to share a little bit about the 100 Black Men of Prince George's, our local nonprofit that serves over 300 mentees in the Prince George's County. We have 50 plus members, and we have 12 mentoring programs. And we'd like to invite you guys to recommend young people to join our programs by going to our website, 100princegeorges.org. That's 100princegeorges.org. My name is Dr. Lamont Bunyan, and I serve as the chapter president. And we would love to be able to help a young person in your life, or to be a resource to partner with any organization that wants to help mentor kids. So again, you can follow us on all social media at 100 Prince George's. And if you're so moved, again, we are a nonprofit. You could donate to our cause by going to our website. Again, I just want to thank all the docs on this panel. So great. We're going to do it again. We look forward to these opportunities to talk to our community. Shout out to Dr. Darren for being the leader of this movement, and to Dr. Troy. And just so happy to be a part of this. Thank you guys for tuning in to the 100 Black Men of Prince George's virtual town hall on mental health. And I'm going to turn it back over to you guys.
Thank you, brother, Dr. President. We truly appreciate you. We truly, truly do. Thank you guys for everything. We are signing off for the evening. We also want to give a shout out to Dr. Marquez Ball for running the tech for us this evening. Dr. Ball, thank you so much for that. And we will bid you good night.